Jeanette Betty-Taylor, and my very able Parliamentary Secretary, Marie-France Lalonde. Today, Statistics Canada released the results of the 2022 survey on sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces. More than 23,000 responses were collected from regular force and primary reserve CAF members. I know this is a statistical report, but the data that is contained within that report reflects the experience of men and women serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. And many of those experiences clearly are traumatic and difficult, and I want to take the opportunity to thank them for participating in the survey. We know that participation can be very difficult for those affected, and their willingness to share their experiences contributes to our understanding of the problem, and it supports and reinforces our resolve to build on a more safe and respectful workplace. I believe we are truly on a path of meaningful and lasting cultural change, but the results of this survey also show us clearly that there's a great deal more work to do. And they reaffirm that the culture of the Canadian Armed Forces must continue to evolve and change. We have an obligation we take very seriously and are absolutely committed to build a safe, respectful, and professional workplace for all of the people serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. Madam Justice Arbour's recommendations, or 48 recommendations, have given us a very clear pathway forward to do just that. And we have made meaningful progress on Madam Justice Arbour's recommendations, but it is also clear there's a great deal more work to do. We are working vigorously on all of the remaining recommendations. We know that the time for action is now, and together we will continue to deliver reforms that stand the test of time, to strengthen, to grow, and to improve this crucial institution. And with that, I and my colleagues will be happy to take your questions.
The reporting issue, it says the majority of those who suffered sexual assault did not report it. And of that 60%, 40% said the reason was they didn't have any confidence it would go anywhere. What does that say to your department's efforts to make the complaint process more transparent, better?
It reminds me of how important those efforts are. Because, first of all, with the recommendations of Madam Justice Arbour, very much reflect that experience and that reality for members of the Canadian Armed Forces. It is absolutely crucial that we create an environment in that is truly respectful and supportive of them. And at the same time, when a member of the services, usually a woman, experiences sexual harassment or sexual assault in the workplace, they have to know and understand and believe that they will be treated with dignity and with respect, that their complaint will be treated seriously, and that the support that they are going to require will be there for them. And they have to know that their organization, and frankly our government, is absolutely committed to implementing the recommendations of Justice Arbour and to create that work environment where people can feel comfortable.
You've mentioned Madam Arbour's recommendations. Yep. Can you provide us an update on how many of those recommendations have actually been actioned upon, given the fact that...
Actually, I can assure you very many of them have been actioned upon.
How many?
What's that?
How many?
Well, the precise number, I think 17 are fully completed, but the rest are all well under development, and there is very important work that has been going on in consultation with members of the Canadian Armed Forces, in consultation with our external monitor, Madam Justice Terran, and I've actually spoken as well to Madam Justice Arbour about how those recommendations need to be implemented. We want to make sure that those changes are institutionalized, that the changes that we're bringing about are respectful of the men and women of the armed forces, and that they are lasting in the changes, and that's why we've been moving forward apace on all of those recommendations. The recommendations provided, I think, a very clear roadmap forward. We have been able to act very quickly. For example, we were told very clearly by members of the Canadian Armed Forces that the duty to report often felt weaponized to them, and so we've repealed that duty to report. They were also explaining that they didn't have the right to go to the Canadian Human Rights Commission until they had exhausted all other avenues of dispute resolution. We've changed that, and now we've enabled them to go directly to there. There are some other very significant changes that have already been implemented, and we've been working very hard on implementing all of the recommendations, perhaps most importantly, Recommendation 5, which has been partially implicated. I don't include it in the 17, because we did make the change that all new sexual assault offenses had to go to the civilian criminal justice system, but institutionalizing that in the Defence Act is going to require legislative changes, and that's work that still is ahead of us, but work that we've been working very hard on and making real progress on.
I want to talk about alcohol. This survey shows that out of all the people that responded, more than 30% of them believe that their sexual assault, there was alcohol involved. Does the military have a problem with alcohol, and should it be banned?
Actually, society has a problem with alcohol, and I can tell you from my previous experience as a police chief, alcohol and other intoxicants are often an implicating factor in sexual assault and misconduct generally. But certainly, I think there is information in that statistical report that we can learn from, and we can look very clearly at the circumstances under which alcohol might have been a factor in these cases, and steps can be taken within the military justice system, within our own orders, within the good order of the Canadian Armed Forces, to ensure that alcohol would not be a factor in these cases. There is learning opportunities from this statistical report. Clearly, alcohol can be a factor. We'll determine whether or not, based on what our own people are telling us, whether steps can be taken. I believe there may be opportunities for us to deal with that.
This is not society. This is a military that faces sexual misconduct crisis, where you have a new survey that shows that there's been an increase in the sexual assault rate even last year. So should the military ban alcohol to help change its culture?
I think we have to look at the use of alcohol and other intoxicants in society generally, but certainly within the Canadian Armed Forces, and where it is a factor in these cases, then steps can be taken. And I think that's one of the strengths of the Canadian Armed Forces. Steps can be taken in order to limit the impact that intoxication can have on these offenses. But there's a great deal of work. It's a very broad subject, and you made reference, Ashley, to an increase in reporting. And certainly, let me acknowledge that that's what's clearly indicated in the statistics, and it's deeply concerning, and we recognize the concern of that. But I think it's also important that 75% of the respondents indicated that they had witnessed an improvement in the way in which the Canadian Armed Forces were dealing with this. This report was completed in October of last year. Since that time, there's been a great deal of work done with respect to Arbour's recommendations, my predecessor indicating our willingness and to implement all of those recommendations. The important work of General Carignan to step forward and to take on responsibility for bringing about a lot of these changes. An increase in reporting is deeply concerning to us, but I think it can also be indicative of a perhaps greater confidence among victims that if they do come forward and bring forward their complaints, that they will be taken seriously. That really is our greatest responsibility, to make sure that ideally, this never happens in the Canadian Armed Forces, but when it does occur, I want to make sure that every member of the service knows that they are respected, that they'll be treated with dignity, that their complaint will be taken seriously, and that the system of the criminal justice system and the culture of the Canadian Armed Forces will treat them appropriately to help them resolve their complaint, but also to make sure that the supports are there to help them recover from the trauma that these events can cause.
Why should members trust you or military officials that you are capable of handling this with any credibility when the number of assaults have actually gone up, and they've also said almost half of the people don't trust you to report it. When they report it, they don't think you're going to handle it properly.
I don't imagine you're implicating me. Of course, the reporting on this statistics actually was completed in October of 2022. I wasn't, of course, the minister then, but what I want them to be confident in is that, first of all, we do understand our responsibility to create a respectful, inclusive, and safe work environment for every member of the Canadian Armed Forces. I want them to be able to see and to participate in helping us bring about that cultural change. Some of it is with regulation, some of it's with legislation, but a great deal of it is within how we recruit people that we bring into the organization, how we support diverse voices, including women in the Canadian Armed Forces. All of those things are important elements of cultural change. I want to assure every member of the Canadian Armed Forces we remain absolutely and resolutely committed to bringing about that change and creating that safe work environment for them. And for some, we will have to continue to work to continue to build that confidence in the Canadian Armed Forces and in its culture. I think we can prove our intent to them by action, and that's the action we've done.
En français, Madame Petitpas, j'aimerais vous demander l'impact que ça peut avoir, les chiffres qui sont dévoilés aujourd'hui sur le recrutement. C'est pas très encourageant, par exemple, pour une jeune femme qui voudrait s'enrôler dans les forces. Comment vous allez peut-être essayer d'endiguer le problème? Parce que ça peut avoir un impact direct sur le recrutement, non?
Mais c'est sûr et certain que pour nous, on veut s'assurer qu'on va avoir un recrutement fort, puis on veut s'assurer que notre force armée canadienne va être inclusive. Et voilà pourquoi pour nous, c'est vraiment important de s'assurer que notre personnel qui travaille, les membres des forces armées canadiennes, se sentent en santé et en sécurité. Voilà pourquoi nous allons continuer à faire sûr que toutes les recommandations que la justice Arbour a mis sur pied, qu'on va continuer à faire le travail qui est nécessaire, puisqu'encore une fois, on veut, oui, absolument attirer des nouvelles personnes des forces armées canadiennes, puis on veut s'assurer que les gens vont se sentir en sécurité.
Mais il n'y a pas un aveu d'échec quand on voit les chiffres que l'on voit aujourd'hui qui sont en augmentation encore. Est-ce que vous avez échoué à faire changer cette culture au sein des forces?
Mais encore une fois, je pense qu'il y a eu beaucoup de travail qui a été fait, qui a été effectué au cours des dernières années, mais il nous reste encore du travail à faire. Pour moi, les données qu'on a vues aujourd'hui, oui, c'est inquiétant, mais aussi, je dois vous dire, pour moi, ça quand même, ça me démontre aussi quand même que les victimes ont quand même eu de la confiance à faire des rapports et puis de faire des plaintes. On veut s'assurer que les gens, s'il y a des activités qui sont criminelles, des activités d'harcèlement qui se passent sur les forces armées canadiennes, que les gens vont faire des rapports comme tels. Et puis encore une fois, que les victimes vont recevoir les services nécessaires. Moi, en tant qu'ancienne travailleuse sociale qui a travaillé auprès des victimes d'agressions sexuelles, je reconnais l'importance de nous assurer que les gens vont faire un rapport, puisqu'encore une fois, on veut changer cette culture, puis on veut s'assurer que nos employés, que les membres des forces armées canadiennes vont être bien appuyés, bien supportés, et puis qu'on va les croire, et puis qu'on va faire notre juste possible pour s'assurer qu'on va tout faire pour les aider.
Lieutenant General Karen Yall has said that in December, in the past, they've seen a spike in reported sexual assaults. They believe it could be tied to more drinking during the holidays and those events on the base. This year, they are not banning alcohol, but they are telling senior leaders to not encourage it at events. What is your message to the Canadian Armed Forces this winter season if alcohol is still in place?
My message is that people should conduct themselves appropriately, and there is no circumstances in which the sexual harassment or sexual assault of any member of the Canadian Armed Forces will ever be tolerated. There are real consequences for those actions, and it's unacceptable. And certainly my expectation is that the leadership of the Canadian Armed Forces will properly supervise social activities involving their members, and at the same time, I want to know how seriously these matters are taken, and for anyone who may experience sexual assault or sexual harassment in the Canadian Armed Forces, that they will be supported, they'll be treated respectfully, that their complaint will be dealt with in an appropriate way, and that services and supports will be there and available to them.
Why is the number of sexual assaults going up and not down? Why do you think it's not declining at all?
Well, first of all, sexual assault is one of the most unreported of all crimes. We know how difficult it is for many victims of sexual assault to actually come forward and make a complaint. So part of that may be the culture of their workplace, that those complaints may be looked upon negatively, and it can be a very traumatic and difficult experience for people who are the victims of sexual assault. We have seen this in every walk of life. One of our responsibilities is to make sure that every victim of sexual assault, first of all, to do everything possible to make sure that those offenses don't occur in the first place, but when and if they do, that every victim knows that they will be treated with dignity and with respect, that they will receive the supports that they need and deserve, that when they bring forward their complaint, it will be taken seriously, it will be acted upon appropriately, it will be thoroughly investigated, and I also want them to know that there are support services available to them, because we know the victims of many sexual assaults may not wish to pursue a criminal investigation, but they're still deeply traumatized by the experience, and we have to be there for them. And we have to be able to provide those supports, and so I want every one of them who has that experience to feel confident that if they come forward with their complaint, they'll be treated appropriately.
How long will it take to change the culture in an organization as big as that one?
Well, I think cultural change, it's well entrained. You mentioned General Karen Yall. I've spoken to the CDS. I believe that there is a very real and sincere commitment within the Canadian Armed Forces. They recognize the challenges that they have experienced. They recognize their responsibility to create a safe, respectful, and supportive work environment for every member of the services. But bringing about effective cultural change, it's a process, not an event. And it's not simply a matter of passing a regulation or a law, or issuing an order. It's about building all of the systems and supports that are necessary to demonstrate, first of all, that there is respect for every member of the armed forces, and that also is a strong culture that says certain behaviors are completely unacceptable, and certainly sexual harassment, sexual assault of anyone, including your fellow workers, can never be tolerated and won't be tolerated in the Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you all very much.